The envelope arrived quietly, slipped onto the marble table with the rest of the morning mail. Thick paper. Elegant lettering. Kind of invitation people saved, framed, talked about. She picked it up without thinking, already knowing what it was. The wedding everyone had been buzzing about for weeks. She smiled faintly as she opened it, expecting to see her name printed alongside her family's. It wasn't there. Her eyes moved slowly over the list. Her parents' names stood out clearly, so did her siblings. Even extended relatives were included, but the space where her name should have been felt painfully empty. At first, she assumed it was a mistake. She read it again. Then again. The truth settled in, heavy and unmistakable. This wasn't an error. It was a choice. She sat down, the invitation resting loosely in her hands. The house around her was quiet, beautiful, expensive. A place many people dreamed of living in. Yet in that moment, it felt colder than it ever had. Being the black adopted daughter of a billionaire couple meant growing up surrounded by privilege, but also by unspoken rules. She learned early how to navigate spaces where she was loved privately but questioned silently. She learned how to blend in, how to soften her presence, how to avoid making others uncomfortable. She folded the invitation carefully and set it aside. No tears. No outburst. Just a familiar ache she didn't know how to explain. She told herself it didn't matter. It was just a wedding. Just one event. But deep down, she knew it wasn't about the celebration. It was about being left out in a way that felt deliberate. Later that day, her mother talked excitedly about dresses and travel plans. Her father joked about old friends he'd see again. She nodded along, offering small smiles at the right moments. No one noticed how quiet she'd become. Or maybe they did, and didn't know how to ask. That night, alone in her room, she stared at the city lights beyond the window. She thought about all the times she'd been introduced with a pause. All the times people asked questions that felt harmless but weren't. She wondered when she had started accepting that love didn't always come with full inclusion. The next morning, her father noticed the envelope sitting where it didn't belong. Not opened. Not displayed. Just there. Picked it up, glanced inside, and frowned. He looked around the room, then up at her. This time, he didn't joke. He didn't rush past the moment. He asked her, simply and directly, what was wrong. She hesitated. Years of staying quiet don't disappear easily. Then she handed him the invitation. He read it once. His expression shifted. Not to anger, not to confusion, something steadier, something resolved. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to explain why this hurt. He folded the invitation carefully and placed it back on the table. The room felt different now. Charged. As if something long ignored had finally been acknowledged. He didn't say much. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, she knew this story was no longer just about being left out. It was about what would happen next. The morning of the wedding arrived dressed in luxury and expectation. Cars lined the driveway, drivers in pressed suits waiting patiently as final preparations echoed through the house. Stylists moved in and out, garment bags brushed against marble floors, and quiet excitement filled every room. She stayed out of the way, watching from a distance, feeling like a guest in her own home. Her father moved through the house differently that day. Slower, more deliberate. He checked his watch once, then again, but not with impatience. With calculation. When her mother asked if everything was ready, he answered calmly. Too calmly. And when he told his daughter to come with him, she looked up in surprise. They arrived at the venue just as guests were settling into their seats. It was grand in every sense. White stone, towering arrangements, soft music floating through the air. The kind of place designed to impress before anyone even spoke. Heads turned immediately. Whispers followed, slipped discreetly from pockets. The billionaire had arrived, and everyone knew his presence alone was newsworthy. But the attention shifted quickly. People noticed who walked beside him. She held her posture steady, even as eyes lingered longer than usual. She wasn't dressed to blend into the background. She wasn't dressed to provoke either. She was simply there. Visible, real, and that alone seemed to unsettle the carefully controlled atmosphere. At the entrance, a coordinator stepped forward, smiling too wide, scanning a list already memorized. Her smile faltered. Apologies came fast. Explanations followed. The words sounded practiced, hollow. Her father listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. Not loudly, not harshly, but clearly enough that nearby guests leaned in. Why is my daughter not on your list? The question hung in the air. No one rushed to answer. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone mentioned an oversight. Another blamed logistics. Nodded slowly, as if considering their words, then gently shook his head. He asked for the microphone intended for the ceremony. There was hesitation, but no refusal. He turned to face the room. Silence fell naturally. He didn't need to demand it. He spoke about family, about dignity, about how inclusion is not a favor but a responsibility. He spoke about how moments like this reveal values more clearly than any speech ever could. He never raised his voice. He never pointed fingers. Yet every sentence landed with undeniable force. Cameras captured everything. Guests avoided eye contact, looked thoughtful. Others looked embarrassed. He ended by thanking the hosts for the invitation. Then he declined it, publicly. Without hesitation. He took his daughter's hand and walked out. The sound of their footsteps echoed longer than expected. Inside, conversations never quite recovered. Outside, the air felt lighter. She hadn't said a word, but she felt stronger with every step away from the building. As the car pulled away, she exhaled deeply. For the first time, she wasn't wondering how to explain herself. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't invisible. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. She had not been left behind. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The city passed by in soft blurs of light and movement, and for once, she didn't feel the need to fill the silence. Her father rested one hand on the steering wheel, the other relaxed at his side, as if a weight he had carried without realizing it had finally been set down. After a few minutes, he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, but different from before. "I should have noticed sooner," he said. Not as an excuse, as an admission. "There were moments I brushed past because life was moving fast. That's on me." She nodded, her eyes still on the window. Hearing him say it mattered more than she expected. For years, she had told herself that being grateful meant being quiet, that love meant not asking for too much. Now she understood something else. Love also meant being protected, openly and without conditions. When they arrived home, her mother was waiting. She had already seen the messages, the calls, the headlines beginning to form. But before any of that could take over the room, she pulled her daughter into a long embrace. Not rushed, not defensive, just present. In that moment, explanations weren't necessary. The story spread quickly. Social circles buzzed. Public apologies surfaced, carefully worded and conveniently timed. Some people defended themselves. Others went silent. But none of it touched her the way it might have before. The noise felt distant, irrelevant. What mattered had already happened. Later that evening, the three of them sat together at the kitchen table. No assistants, no schedules, just honesty. She spoke about moments she had never voiced, about introductions that came with hesitation, about rooms where she felt like a question instead of a person. Her parents listened without interrupting, without correcting, without minimizing. Her father reached for her hand. "Never needed to earn your place," he said quietly. "You already had." Something inside her shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. The feeling of being tolerated loosened its grip, replaced by something firmer. Belonging. Days passed. Life returned to its rhythm, but it wasn't the same. She walked into rooms with her shoulders back. She spoke when something felt wrong, and when people looked at her, she no longer searched their faces for permission to exist. The wedding became a footnote, a lesson others learned the hard way. For her, it became a turning point, not because of public attention or consequences, but because of a private truth finally acknowledged. Some families are tested by quiet moments, not loud ones, and sometimes, the most powerful statement isn't made on a stage, but in choosing who you stand beside when it matters most. She went to bed that night with a sense of peace she hadn't known before. Not because the world had changed, but because her place in it was no longer in question.